The sky tore open with fire. One moment the ship drifted in silence above the desert planet, hull glowing faint blue as it crossed the atmosphere, and the next, alarms screamed like dying animals. Red lights flashed across the narrow corridors. People ran, shouting orders that were drowned out by the roar of tearing metal. The woman pressed herself against a wall, clutching the harness strap as the vessel shook so hard she thought her bones might break. A violent blast ripped through the left side, sucking air and bodies into the black void. She shut her eyes and held on, but the sound of panic would not leave her ears. Somewhere beyond the fire and smoke, a deep voice echoed through the Kumsalian words. Harsh and cold, then the transmission cut. It was no accident. Someone had shot them down. The crash came in fragments. She remembered the ship spinning, chairs breaking free, a wall tearing open to reveal the desert stretching forever below. Then the ground rose like a hammer. The ship split apart as if made of glass. Screams turned to silence. Dust swallowed everything. When she woke, her mouth was full of grit and blood, her ears ringing so badly she thought she had gone deaf. The sun was cruel, burning her skin. The wreckage smoldered around her, pieces of metal scattered for miles across the lifeless sand. The air stank of smoke and scorched fuel. Her hand shook as she pulled herself to her feet, vision blurring. In the glare, she tried to call for survivors, but her throat was dry, her voice weak. No answer came. Only the sound of wind scraping across endless dunes. Then she saw movement. At first, she thought it was another human crawling free from the wreckage. But the figure that staggered from the smoke was taller, broader, with skin glistening like dark stone. Its eyes burned gold in the sunlight, its armor cracked and smoking, an alien soldier. Her heart froze. He was the enemy. The reason her people had been fighting for years. Should have been dead, broken in the crash, but somehow he stood. For a moment, neither moved. The distance between them felt like a chasm. She could reach for a shard of metal at her feet. He could raise the weapon, slung at his side, and this would end. But the desert pressed on them with its silence, and the truth hit her harder than fear. They were both trapped here, both broken by the fall. The sun burned higher, merciless and heavy. Her head spun as she stumbled forward, searching the wreck. For water, for shade, for anything to stop the rising ache in her skull. The alien followed at a distance, limping, his steps heavy in the sand. Every time she turned, he stopped, his golden eyes watching her like a predator waiting for weakness. She wanted to scream, to demand why he had survived when so many of her people had not, but the words would not come. Her tongue felt like sandpaper. The desert swallowed anger as easily as it swallowed sound. Hours passed, though time felt broken. Heat waves shimmered on the horizon. She collapsed once, dragging herself back up with trembling arms, while the alien leaned on a shard of twisted metal, refusing to fall. Strange, she thought in a haze of exhaustion. They were enemies, yet their struggle was the same: survive or die in the dust. When the night came, it came fast. The desert turned from fire to ice, the air so cold it cut her lungs. Shadows stretched across the dunes, and silence became heavier, thicker, until it pressed against her chest. Then came the noise. Not human, not alien, not machine. The sound of something moving across the sand, large and slow, claws clicking like knives against stone. Her body froze. The alien's head snapped toward the darkness. From the wreckage, a massive shape emerged, eyes glowing faintly green, its body armored with scales. It circled the broken ship like it had smelled blood. The woman felt terror clamp around her heart. Alone, she would be dead in seconds. She glanced at the alien, expecting him to vanish into the dark, to let the creature take her. But instead, he raised the broken weapon from his side and stepped between her and the beast. The fight was chaos. The alien roared, slamming the creature, back with sheer strength, claws and teeth flashing under the pale starlight. The woman stumbled for cover, gripping a jagged piece of metal, ready to strike if it got close. Sand flew, sparks lit the night as steel clashed against scale. The alien was strong, but the beast was stronger. It slammed him into the wreckage, shattering metal, and for a moment she thought he would not rise. Something inside her broke. Free then, not reason, not strategy, just instinct. She charged forward and drove the shard of metal into the beast's exposed eye. The creature shrieked, its scream ripping across the night, before it thrashed wildly and fled into the dunes. Leaving a trail of dark blood, silence returned, but it was different now. She stood panting, her hands shaking, the shard falling from her grip. The alien lay in the sand, chest rising slow, his golden eyes watching her with something she could not name. Gratitude? Respect? She could not tell. The desert stretched. Around them, endless and uncaring. They were still enemies, trapped on a world with no hope. Yet in that moment, with the starlight on his face and the silence pressing close, she understood a terrible truth. If she wanted to survive, if either of them wanted to survive, they would need each other. The night stretched endlessly, broken only by the hiss of the cold wind sweeping across the dunes. The woman crouched beside the broken hull of the ship, her breath turning to mist in the freezing air. Her body shook uncontrollably, not just from the temperature, but from what she had just seen. The alien lay on his side, blood staining the sand beneath him, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. For long moments she just watched, torn between fear and instinct. He was her enemy. His people had destroyed ships like hers across dozens of worlds. Yet when the beast came, he had stepped forward first. If he had not fought, she would already be a corpse lying in the sand. That truth weighed on her like the cold itself. Her fingers brushed against a dented supply pack half buried. In wreckage, she tore it open with trembling hands, pulling free a shattered water container, some burned ration bars, and a small thermal sheet. It was nothing compared to what they needed, but she dragged the sheet across to where the alien lay. He stirred, golden eyes flickering open, watching her as she dropped the blanket near him. His lips parted, strange words leaving his mouth, sharp and guttural, but the meaning was lost on her.
Oh.
She almost told him she didn't understand, but her throat was too dry to waste words. Instead, she just sat back, pressed against twisted metal, staring out into the empty desert. The silence was unbearable. Every sound seemed louder than it should, be the faint crackle of cooling wreckage. The alien's rough breathing, the whistle of wind across sand. Sleep wouldn't come. She kept seeing the creature's glowing eyes in the dark, hearing its claws scrape across the wreck. What else was out there? How many more things stalked the dunes, waiting for them to weaken? The thought churned in her stomach until she pressed her face into her knees, trying to block it out. When she looked up again, the alien was staring at her, not with anger, not with hatred, just studying, like he was also wondering if this strange, fragile human could be trusted. Dawn came like fire. The horizon lit with deep red, and the cold vanished almost instantly under the rising sun. The woman shielded her eyes, groaning as the heat sank in again. Her lips were cracked, her skin dry, her body begging for water. She forced herself to stand, wobbling slightly. The alien pushed himself up too, slow but steady, using a piece of broken plating as a cane. For a moment, they faced each other, both unsteady, both marked by blood and dirt. And then she realized something: the desert wasn't silent anymore. In the distance, beyond the dunes, a low rumble carried through the air. Not natural, not wind, something mechanical. Her heart leaped. Rescue? A distress beacon from the wreck? Might have worked. Maybe her people had heard. Maybe another human ship was coming. She climbed onto a broken wing, shading her eyes, trying to spot movement across the horizon. Dust shimmered, a plume rising slowly. The alien rose beside her, his golden eyes narrowing.
Ice.
His expression was not relief. It was warning, as the dust grew nearer. She understood why. The sound was too harsh, too heavy. It wasn't a rescue ship. Crawling over the dune came a machine, massive, with 6 metal legs stabbing into the sand. Its body gleamed with armor, plates shifting like a living creature. Its head bristled with sensors, glowing faint green. A scavenger drone, designed to strip wrecks and kill anything left alive. Her chest tightened. If it was here, it meant one thing: the crash had been no accident. Someone had wanted them dead, and the machines were here to finish the job. Alien grunted, gripping his makeshift weapon tighter. She looked at him, panic clawing at her chest. How could they fight something like that? They had no real weapons, no cover, no energy to run. The drone's legs dug deeper into the sand as it drew closer, sensors sweeping back and forth, searching. Her mind raced, searching for an answer for anything. And then she saw it, the fuel lines spilling from the wreckage, slick and dark against the sand. If she could lure the drone near enough, if she could spark it, the explosion might take it down. Her heart hammered as she scrambled across the wreck, grabbing a shard of metal. She pointed at the leaking fuel, then at the drone, hoping the alien would understand. His eyes followed, and to her shock, he gave the smallest nod. For a brief moment, they weren't enemies. They were survivors, reading each other without words. The machine picked up their movement. Its sensors flared brighter, and the rumble of its legs quickened. The ground shook as it broke into a crawl toward them. The woman sprinted, her lungs burning, dragging the alien's attention with her toward the trap. The drone's weapons hissed, green beams cutting across the wreckage, burning holes through metal and sand. She dove behind cover, praying the alien had followed. He had. With a roar that shook his battered body, the alien hurled a jagged engine core straight at the leaking fuel. The spark was instant. Fire raced across the sand in a violent wave, swallowing the drone's legs before it could shift away. The explosion ripped the desert open, a deafening blast that threw both survivors to the ground. Smoke filled the sky, and for a moment silence claimed the world again. When she lifted her head, ears ringing, she saw the wrecked machine lying in twisted pieces. They had survived again. Slowly, painfully, she turned to the alien. He was already watching her. His lips moved, and though she could not understand the words, the meaning was clear in his eyes. They were enemies by blood, but the desert had decided otherwise. From now on, their fates were bound together. The smoke from the destroyed drone drifted slowly into the morning sky, black against the bright desert sun. The woman pressed her hand to her ear, listening, but no sound of more machines came. Only the endless whistling of hot wind across the sand. She sat still, every nerve sharp with tension, waiting for another attack. When none came, she allowed herself a shaky breath, though her body still trembled. The explosion had bought them time, but it had also sent a signal. Somewhere, someone now knew survivors lived. That meant more machines would come. She turned to the alien. He was crouched low, eyes scanning the horizon, golden and unblinking. His body shook with fatigue, but his grip on the metal shard was tight. Even broken and bleeding, he radiated the stubborn presence of a fighter. For a moment, she wondered what his people thought of humans. Did they see them as fragile, unworthy of survival? The thought burned in her chest, but she pushed it away. What mattered now wasn't what their peoples believed. It was the next hour, the next step. She forced herself to stand, knees weak beneath the desert heat. The alien rose too, slow and deliberate, until they stood side by side among the wreckage. They could not speak, not in words either could understand. But when his gaze followed hers to the endless horizon, she felt the weight of his thoughts all the same. They had to move. Staying near the wreck meant death. The scavenger drones would return, and next time, one explosion would not be enough. She pointed toward the far ridges where jagged rocks cut into the sky, shapes sharp and dark against the glowing sand. Shelter might exist there. Water, maybe. Anything better than this graveyard? The alien gave a single nod, then took the first step into the burning desert. The heat was merciless. Hours passed like a nightmare of shimmering light. And shifting dunes, every step dragged their bodies lower, weaker. Her throat ached with thirst, her legs screamed with pain, and more than once she stumbled, nearly collapsing into the sand. Each time she forced herself up, fueled by raw will and the alien's silent presence. Once, When she fell and did not rise quickly enough, she felt a shadow fall across her. The alien stood over her, offering his arm. His eyes narrowed, his voice low and foreign, but the meaning was clear. Get up. She took his arm, steadying herself, and together they pressed onward. By the time they reached the rocks, the sun was beginning to fall. Shadows stretched long across the dunes, giving the world a strange, eerie calm. The rocks loomed tall, cracked, and jagged like teeth. They slipped between narrow passages, where the air was cooler, the sand giving way to stone. Relief washed over her. Here the machines could not easily hunt. But as the first sense of safety touched her, another dread followed. She froze, her hand pressed to the stone wall, listening. There, faint but real. A clicking sound, too sharp to be natural, echoing deep within the rocks. She turned slowly, eyes meeting the alien's. He had heard it too. His face hardened, lips pulled tight, every muscle tense. The silence between them deepened, thick with unspoken truth. The drones were not their only hunters. Something else lived here. The clicking grew louder, joined by scraping, like claws against stone. Darkness pooled in the narrow cracks ahead, shadows shifting unnaturally. Her heart pounded so loud, it drowned the sound of her breath. She wanted to run, but where? The desert behind them was worse. Shadows ahead promised teeth and hunger. She had no weapon, but a shard of metal. No shield, but a thin will to live. She looked at the alien, waiting for him to act, and then she saw his face change. Not fear, not even anger, but recognition. He knew this sound. He had heard it before. His golden eyes flashed with something primal as he raised his weapon higher, body dropping into a stance that spoke of countless battles. He looked at her once, single glance that said everything words could not. Stay alive. The shadows shifted again, and then they moved. From the cracks crawled a shape, long and low, with limbs that bent too many times. Its body glistened like wet stone, its head armored in jagged plates. Eyes like black glass fixed on them, unblinking. Another came behind it, then another, until the narrow passage seemed alive with movement. The air grew heavy with the clicking, like an army of knives scraping together. The woman's breath caught in her throat. Whatever these creatures were, they were not machines. They were older, more savage, born of this world than they had been. Waiting, the alien let out a sound half roar, half command, and charged first. The clash was sudden, violent. Teeth against steel, claws against stone. She could not think, could not hesitate. She gripped her shard of metal tighter, forced her shaking legs to move, then threw herself into the shadows at his side. The desert had been merciless. The machines had been deadly. But here, in the dark heart of the rocks, a new enemy had risen. And survival would demand more than strength. It would demand trust. The cavern shook with the sound of claws and stone. The woman's arms ached as she swung her shard again and again, every strike wild but desperate. One of the creatures lunged at her, its armored head slamming into the rocks where she had stood. Only a heartbeat before, dust fell from the ceiling, choking the air. She stumbled back, gasping, her hands trembling. But before the creature could attack again, the alien's blade cut through the air. Sparks flew as metal met the beast's shell, forcing it back into the shadows. His roar echoed, deep and raw, shaking the walls around them. For a moment, she believed they might push the creatures back, but then she saw it more of them, slipping. From the cracks, their eyes glowing like dull coals. The cavern floor writhed with their movement. Alien slashed and struck, his movements fast, precise, trained. But even he could not stop them all. One beast lunged low, raking claws across his leg. He staggered, blood dripping hot and dark onto the stone. Another creature struck from the side, knocking him against the wall. She cried out, rushing to him, but he pushed her back with a forceful shove. His eyes burned into hers, fierce, commanding her to stay back. She froze, torn between fear and anger, the shard shaking in her grip. He was protecting her, even as his own strength bled away. But how long could he hold? Her heart pounded with a thought she could not escape. What if he fell? What if he chose to leave her behind to save himself? She had no reason to trust him. He was not human. He was a stranger, a fighter from a species she knew nothing about. Maybe this was the moment when the fragile bond between them would break. Maybe this was where he decided she was too weak, too slow, too useless to save. The creatures pressed closer. Their clicking filled her skull, drowning out every thought. And then one of them leapt, not at him, but at her. Its body slammed her to the ground, its jaws snapping inches from her face. She screamed, pressing the shard into its throat, but its shell was too hard. The weight crushed her chest, stealing her breath. Her vision blurred as panic took hold, and then the weight was gone. The alien's blade tore the creature aside, black blood spilling onto the stone. He pulled her up with a rough hand, his face inches from hers, eyes burning with rage gnawed at her. But for her, in that single moment, she understood. He had not left her. He would not leave her. The cavern walls shook again as more creatures crawled down from the ceiling, their claws tearing grooves into the rock. They were surrounded. The alien's chest heaved, his wound bleeding freely, his weapon slick with black blood. He looked at her once more, then pressed something into her hand. A small device, smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with blue light. She stared at it, confused. He growled low, his words foreign, but his meaning sharp as a blade. Run. Her throat tightened. He wanted her to leave him, to escape while he held them off. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes, but he shoved her toward the narrow passage behind them. The device pulsed brighter, vibrating in her hand. Some kind of beacon, a signal? She didn't know. All she knew was that he was pushing her away, giving her a chance to live. The creatures swarmed. The alien roared and charged into them, his blade carving arcs of silver light in the darkness. She stumbled back, clutching. The glowing device, torn between running and fighting, her chest aching with fear and fury. And then it happened. One of the creatures slammed him against the wall, its claws sinking deep. His cry of pain cut through her like fire. For a heartbeat she froze. The thought struck hard and cruel. He's gone. Can't survive this. But another thought rose. Stronger, sharper. If I run, I'm dead anyway. Her grip on the shard tightened. She turned back toward the swarm, her voice breaking the air in a scream as she charged into the shadows. She would not leave him. She would not break. The cavern filled with chaos roars, screams, claws against stone. The device in her hand burned brighter, humming with power, as if waiting for her to make a choice. She realized then it was more than a beacon. It was a weapon, or something far greater. Her trust had been shaken, nearly broken. But in that moment, as the creatures closed in and the alien bled, she made her decision. She would fight. She would not abandon him, just as he had never abandoned her. And whatever this device was, she would use it. Even if it changed everything. Cavern was a storm of shadows and roars, the sound of claws and stone ringing in every corner. She moved through it like a ghost, the shard of metal trembling in her hands, her eyes fixed on the glowing device the alien had pressed into her palm. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed alive, vibrating against her skin, as if it had a will of its own. She could feel heat radiating from it, a strange energy that seemed to hum in time with her racing heart. Somewhere in the chaos, the alien fought, his blade flashing, golden eyes sharp, every strike precise despite the blood flowing down his leg.
Ow.
But the creatures were relentless, and she knew this would not last forever. She stumbled over a fallen rock, the device slipping in her grip. A low growl rose behind her, and she spun to see one of the creatures leaping, jaws wide, claws ready. Instinct drove her. She pressed the device against the creature's chest. It pulsed once, twice, and then a beam of blue energy shot outward, hitting the beast. Its scream echoed, filled with fury and pain, and it collapsed, thrashing violently. Before going still, she stared, stunned, as the blue light flickered and the device hummed, alive and powerful. The alien's head turned, golden eyes widening as he saw what she had done. A roar of recognition left him as he fought, slicing through another beast with a strength she had never seen. It was as if the device had amplified their fight, their survival. Together they pushed forward, moving in a rhythm neither had spoken. Of each action, instinctive, connected. The creatures fell back, snarling and wounded. Confused by the surge of energy that now flowed between human and alien, she ran toward him. Weaving through the swarm, her body bruised, her lungs burning. The alien slashed one last creature away and staggered to her side. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she understood a wordless truth. They were equals in this fight. Partners against a world that wanted them dead. They didn't speak. But the device pulsed stronger in her hand, and somehow, she knew it was waiting for them to do more than survive. It wanted them to take control. The cavern shook as the ground trembled beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling and distant rocks, cracked, threatening collapse. The creatures hissed, their patience gone. But she focused on the device, pressing it to the nearest stone wall. The energy pulsed outward, brighter, spreading across the rock, weaving through cracks, climbing walls. The creatures screeched, their bodies convulsing under the strange blue force. Light filled the cavern, blinding and pure, and for a moment, everything was silent except the hum of the device. When her eyes cleared, the cavern had changed. The rocks seemed alive, glowing with the same blue energy. The creatures lay still, subdued, not dead, but powerless. The alien turned to her, breathing heavily, and for the first time, he extended his hand, not in warning, not in command, but in trust. She took it, feeling the warmth of his grip, and together they felt the power of the device flow through them. Now, it was not just a weapon. It was a key. A force that could reshape the world around them. Outside. The desert stretched endless and harsh, but for the first time, hope flickered. They were no longer merely survivors. They had the power to fight back, to protect themselves, even to change. The balance of life on this planet, the bond between them, forged in fire and blood, was now complete. Trust, once broken, had been reforged stronger than before. But the device's hum was insistent, demanding more. It was alive, aware, and waiting. She looked at the alien, his golden eyes meeting hers. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Together they understood. Survival was only the beginning. The next step would decide the fate not only of themselves, but of anyone who might come to this lifeless world. The desert, once a tomb, now held possibility. And they would face it together. They stepped out of the cavern into the glaring sunlight, battered, bleeding, but unbroken. Behind them, the ruins of the wreck glowed faintly with residual energy. Ahead, the desert stretched, empty, but full of potential. For the first time, they moved not as enemies, not as human and alien, but as allies, united, powerful, and ready to face whatever horrors awaited them beyond the dunes. The device pulsed once more, sharp and urgent, and they knew the world itself had taken notice. Their future, intertwined and uncertain, was waiting, and together they would meet it head-on. The desert stretched endlessly before them, gold and red under the rising sun. The wind carried heat and dust, but it could not touch the sense of triumph that pulsed through them. The woman and the alien stood side by side, their bodies battered, their faces streaked with blood and sweat, but their eyes sharp and alert. Behind them, the remnants of the cavern glowed faintly with the blue energy of the device, now silent, as if satisfied that its work had been done. For the first time since the crash, they breathed without fear. Knowing the world had tested them and found them worthy, the air was still, and for a moment they simply watched the dunes, the horizon endless and empty. The silence was not peaceful. It was the quiet of survival, the fragile calm before the next storm. They defeated the creatures that had hunted them, learned to rely on one another, unlocked the power of the device that could reshape their fate. Yet even in victory, the knowledge lingered that this desert world had more secrets than they could imagine. Something ancient had awakened, and its force was now tied to them. She glanced at the alien, golden eyes meeting hers. The wreckage, They had been enemies. On the dunes, they had been allies. Now, in the clear light of dawn, they were something new, partners in survival and in hope. The bond between them was no longer fragile. Trust it was solid, forged through fire, pain, and shared danger. Every glance, every gesture, spoke of understanding without words. She realized, with a clarity that filled her chest, that whatever came next, they would face it together. The horizon shifted subtly, a glint of movement catching her eye. She stiffened, hand going instinctively to the shard of metal she still carried, but the alien's hand touched hers, steadying, calming. He did not speak, no words were needed. They stepped forward together, moving toward the faint shimmer in the distance. As they walked, the desert itself seemed less hostile. Shadows that had once threatened now lay still. The dunes appeared almost welcoming, and for the first time, she imagined this barren world as more than a tomb. It could be a new beginning. Hours passed as they navigated the dunes, finding signs of life where none should exist. Small plants, clinging to the sand, deep fissures that held water, creatures that watched from a distance without threat. The alien pointed to some of these signs, communicating silently, and she began to understand the subtle language of survival on this world. Together, they learned not just to endure, but to move with purpose. Every step forward was a small victory, a claim on the planet that had once seemed certain to destroy them as the sun rose higher. A distant shimmer broke through the heat haze. At first it seemed impossible, an outline of metal, gleaming and angular. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be a rescue ship? Or another enemy? The alien's eyes narrowed, golden pupils reflecting the sunlight, scanning the horizon with precision. Then he stepped forward, confident, and she realized that it did not matter. Whatever it was, they were ready. They had power now, knowledge, and the bond that had carried them through death and despair. Together, they could face whatever came. When they reached the source of the shimmer, they discovered the half-buried remains of an ancient starship, massive and silent, resting in the sands as if waiting for them. The alien approached it, hands tracing symbols etched into the hull long ago, energy from the device still faintly pulsing under his touch. She felt a thrill of hope and fear, the same sensation she had felt when she first touched the device in the cavern. It was alive, powerful, and it had chosen them. A ship like this could take them off the planet, could carry them to safety, could change the course of human and alien destiny alike. For a long moment, they simply stood together before it, boat as exhausted, hearts still pounding, eyes locked. The desert wind carried whispers of possibility, and she realized that everything they had endured, the crash, the creatures, the broken trust, the awakening device, had led to this point. They were no longer victims of circumstance, they were architects of their own future. And as the sun climbed high into the sky, casting its light across endless dunes, she understood something deeper than survival. The alien beside her was no longer her enemy. He was her partner, her ally, the proof that hope could rise from even the most barren world. Together, they would leave this desert planet behind. Together, they would face the stars. And together, they would shape the future, human and alien, side by side. United by the fire of what they had survived and the promise of what was yet to come. The desert stretched on, silent and eternal, but a new dawn had arrived, not just in the sky, but in them. And with that dawn, everything had changed.